We are now live.
Great. Good
And,
morning.
and good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Kronk, and I am here with both Amelia and Meg, who are going to introduce themselves in just 1 second. And we have started this blab show called Positively Special Ed. Megan, do you want to start by introducing yourself?
Sure. My name's Meg Hayden, and Amelia and I met about a year ago. And I had started an organization called Process This to help students with learning disabilities because I'm a kid with a learning disability. I always introduce myself actually as a kid with a learning disability instead of an adult. It's like I'm Peter Pan or something. so, so back like 2, 3 years ago, I was living at my parents. I had no job. We were like sitting outside having dinner, and I asked my parents, I was like, what was that learning disability I had back in the day? As if like it didn't still completely and utterly affect me, especially since I was living at home with my parents at like 27 years old. And they were like, oh, it's called processing. And I was like, I've never heard of that. And so then I started doing all this research and found that it was such a relief to know like what was wrong with me or like why I was different. And so it allowed me to like take my exterior, my armor that I had built up and like start to open that up, like almost like open your heart up to everybody else. Cause I had gone through life just being, just trying to make everybody know that I was smart. Like everybody had to know. So everybody had to know about the last NPR that I heard or the last article I read. So that's a little bit about me. And, yeah.
And when you shared this stuff in the session where I met you both, Amelia and Meg, I identified so much with that. Amelia.
I'm Amelia Giordano, and I live in New Jersey. I met Meg a year ago. I saw her Process This Facebook page after being sent to it, and I called her up, or I messaged her, and she called me up, and we talked for an hour, and it was so amazing because her story was my story, and the experiences she had were the same experiences I had, and we just instantly connected. Mm-hmm. And what was so interesting about it was that we really did have so many of the same life's challenges, and we dealt with them in very similar ways. And we didn't necessarily have a lot of help along the way because we were kids in the education system in the 90s. So because our challenges were the same and our triumphs were the same, we kind of just started brainstorming. And, we realized that we wanted to work together to change this for kids because, as Meg says, she doesn't want her grandchildren to feel this way. And, I want no student in the education system to feel the way we did. So that's sort of how we got working together. I also have a learning disability. So it's been a really exciting journey because we've been meeting so many cool people and, trying to make a difference in our schools, which has been a really interesting challenge in and of itself. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
My name is Jennifer Kronk, and I met these two awesome women when I was at the EduCon conference. And I have to say that both, I think Amelia and Megan are kind of like heroes because when I was in your sessions, I've always been in sessions. I'm a professional developer by trade, and my specialist is educational technology. And I've always kept like my learning disability as like my dirty little secret. And I so identify with what Megan was saying, like, oh, I would overextend myself to try to prove that I wasn't stupid. And there were times I don't know if either one of you done this, but in one of my positions, I would be the person to make the dumb blonde jokes because I'd be covering up the sense of inadequacy that I'd have. So I would make fun of me before you could make fun of me for doing something that I didn't have any control over. And I would do that a lot. And I remember one of my administrators started throwing out the dumb blonde jokes with me. And I was like, kind of like looked like aghast at him. And he was like, well, you always do it. And he was right. I'm the first person to put me down because God forbid that I'm actually authentic about, you know, this is something that I deal with on a daily basis. And it really took seeing both you, Amelia, and Megan to be these brave people out there saying, hey, why aren't CSE meetings student-led? And you both introduced yourselves as learning to disabled adults. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are my people. These are really my people, you know? And I really respect you both so much for doing that, because that's just not something that I have been brave enough to do by the outset. And after sitting in your session and then like obsessively hanging out with you that Saturday the entire time, that's when I was like, you know what? This is something that is so important. And Matt, props to you for Process This, because I love that name. That's such a legit name. But it really is something that, you know, I don't like to admit that I do struggle with just about every day. Like I come across some issue that has to do with my processing or transcribing. I remember the calendar idiosyncrasy that I shared with you guys, like just came up, you know, just yesterday, where I was like, is that a 9 o'clock or a 9:30? You know, because that's one of those weird things that I have. And so I just wanted to say that I appreciate you guys so much, and that you really, in a way, freed me up to actually be okay with being a learning disabled adult and to talk about it in a public forum.
Well, because the thing that's interesting is that what we found actually is that it's okay to be a learning disabled kid. Because that's why when I always introduce myself as a kid, because it's like not okay to be an adult with a learning disability. So like in school, you know, we have all of these apparent accommodations, right? But once you get out into the working place, like kind of all on your own, and you shouldn't just in a professional setting, you shouldn't be who you actually are. And you definitely shouldn't have a learning disability. Like, especially in the workplace. And I think I remember working at my school. I work at the Workshop School in West Philadelphia. And I just remember saying, like, you know, is this okay to say? And I was like, well, if it's not, then like, this is not the place for me, you know? And so once I told everybody that I was that I have learning disability, auditory processing, it was so great because there were so many people that just said, like, that's cool. Like, thank you for sharing that. And I mean, there's other people that are going to say, like, it's a crutch, but I just don't care anymore.
So I think that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, right? Because, and I loved what Adine said. Adine is going to come on later in the show. Not today's show, but another show. And Meg, I can see you.
We're waiting for you, Adine.
But I think what's really, really cool is that Adine said to us, you know, your admission of your own learning disabilities shifted the conversation in the room for these teachers. And so, you know, thank you for calling us brave. I think you're also brave for standing up and sharing your story. But the three of us together collectively, including the other woman who shared that she had a learning disability, I think that just changed the entire conversation for the educators that were in the room. I think they were more conscious of what they were saying. I think that they were more empathic. They were really centered around, caring for us as people in the room, caring for us as the children that we were when we went through the education system. And so it's really cool because I think one of the reasons why we're here is because we want to shift that energy. We want people to feel like they can talk about it. We want adults to identify themselves as being learning disabled if that's, part of their process and that's where they are and they feel comfortable doing that because it's who we are and people need to see us as our authentic selves.
I think what's kind of interesting too is is we're giving our little selves, like our 10-year-old, 12-year-old selves, that voice that we never had, that was like very true. And so when I started doing all this research, I started like just asking everybody like about learning disabilities, like who had them, and everyone started coming and talking to me, and it was so crazy. And I think what was really awesome is that like the stories are the same. We didn't have a voice. People didn't get us. We were trying to hide everything. Like we didn't want anybody to know that we had a learning disability, and it sort of, you know, has come into our adult lives. But at the EduCon, it was so, I felt like I had some solidarity there, that like there were other people that had learning disabilities and IEPs in the room, and I was like, okay. I was like, I feel really good about this.
Definitely. No, I totally agree. That was such a great feeling. And I think the reason why we're doing this now is because, you know, Meg and Jen and I have worked in education for some time, and we're starting to see things change, and we can make the experience for kids more student-centered. And we want to talk about that. And we want to talk about, you know, our experience. We want to talk about the experience of our kids. We want to talk about our schools. We want to talk about what parents can do. We want to talk about what kids can do. You know, we're really here for all of those reasons. And throughout this TV show, you guys can ask us questions, and we'll get to them at the end. But yeah, this is like an all place, things for all. What am I trying to say?
Things for all discussion.
All special ed.
You know, something that came up for me while you were both sharing, you know, we're talking about, you know, and also in our chat where Matt had mentioned, it becomes an opportunity for people to say, how can I help you? I think for kids, you know, regular students, conventional students these days, I mean, the teachers were pretty much set on, and we're all educators. I mean, all three of us are educators. And next year, September hits, I'm going to be in education for 20 years. And oh my God, not ready for that. But anyway,
that's sad.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that we're so focused on our conventional students, or students that are basically not classified. I'm sure there's tons of students that are not unclassified students that would benefit from services. But for our unclassified students, we're of this whole like college and career readiness, which is really, I really believe very firmly in like what Chris Lehman was talking about really creating citizens, because it's really the informed citizens that change a society. It's very short-sighted to think about college and career readiness, because the careers that are out there now are not going to be out there in 5 years. They're going to be completely different. That's been shown time and time again. But our focus is on the college and career readiness because that's what we're supposed to do. But with our special ed kids, we're teaching them how to modify their approach to life. And that's the important thing. I think that the shift is so important when you're dealing with the conventional tactics for education than you are with special education. Because really, when it comes down to it, that whatever modifications they learn, these are modifications they are going to be using throughout their entire life, whether they do or don't learn. And I'm sure that both of you have also come up with, I have modifications that I've discovered on my own, that this is just the way I learn. And this is what works for me. And even though I might come across another person who's also dyslexic, who might be classified, it manifests itself. And so it presents in so many different ways that, you know, what works for me in a modification way does not work for other people. Like I tend to be somebody who, for some reason, I need to orthographically scribe things, and I'm all tech. I live in Google Docs, but when I need to remember something, I have to scribe it. You know, it's just one of those things. But I think that that's an important shift to also note, is that I think that when we're dealing with special ed kids, when you have a teacher who's focused on modifications that'll impact life, I think that's actually a more sustainable and truer goal to have than this whole college and career readiness.
Right. I think you're definitely right, because I think, and also the thing, like the transition goals that end up happening where students are actually allowed to become part of their IEP meetings by law. Once you have transition planning, you have to have your kids in the IEP meetings. the transition goals are like one-liners, and it's a research three different career paths you could take. And it doesn't go any further than just this like observation of what the outside world can look like. And I think for students with learning disabilities, we actually have to do everything. Like it can't just be something that we look at. It has to, everything we do, we go in 100%. Like Amelia and I were talking about that, about how our lives are not just, on the surface. And like we don't really work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the principal of the school, one of the workshops he led, I can't remember the competency handout, but it was all about like root finding, self-discovery and root finding. And that was actually, we did sort of a vote, and that was one of the things that people really wanted to focus on. And it was difficult to make assessments for that, but it's so important to have kids map out their own route and to figure out where they're going and why they're going there and how far they've gone. I think you're right. It's so important for them to do it. And it's so important for them to focus on that, because it's not just about those generic career and college readiness standards. You can't look to those to give the experience. You have to have the experience and learn from it.
It's setting intention too, right?
Mm-hmm.
As to where you want to go. And the other funny thing too is whenever I ask somebody like what their job is, they're like, well, I'm the chief operator of this or whatever. And I'm like, so what do you do every day? Because like, I don't really care about what your title is or what the like overarching things are. Like, are you standing? Are you sitting? Are you sitting at a desk? Are you moving around? Like, I need to know like exactly how many people are you talking to? Are you on the phone all day? Just like whatever it is, like I need to know your whole day and what it looks like, because that to me is important. Those like the detail, and the overarching. I feel like we live, like learning disabled kids live in this higher place, and then also like really in depth in the details, and we get lost like somewhere in the middle.
I'd agree with that. I would totally agree with that. So why don't we talk a little bit about the session that I walked into that you both were facilitating? Was when are CSE meetings going to be student led? And now you're talking about like right now, it's not necessary until transition planning, but I have an 8-year-old that has an IEP, and Jack, I would love for him to be able to simply say to his teachers, this is not the way I learn best. Or like my daughter, I know that she learns best and she's sitting up front. Or we just recently gave her, now I'm very fortunate. I have 2 amazing teachers for my children. I couldn't ask for better teachers. They will bend over backwards for my kids. But I think that there's something really to be added for a child, even my 8-year-old son, beginning to advocate for himself, because I can say how I think he learns best, but I could be wrong. I'm not, I'm just his mom. I'm not in his little body. Yeah. So I'd love to hear more about you guys.
Living in this world though, like with the it's a totally different world. Like we had like one of our feet in like we had the internet, but I mean we were just instant messaging, at least when Amelia and I were growing up. But now it's like you're born and you're playing games in the iPad already.
Yeah, at least when we wanted to instant message, we had to like sit down at our computer and like focus on it. Whereas these kids can like bring the computer anywhere into the wild that they want. And that's a really good point. Like this whole world is shifting so much that it is even more difficult for kids to get and stay grounded.
Okay, I just have to point out that when you guys were talking about instant messaging, like my version of instant messaging back in the redneck boondocks that I grew up in was a CB radio. That was the redneck social networking. There was no instant messenger at that time.
Did you get on like Saturday nights? Did you call up like truck drivers and stuff?
I totally did. They were like the coolest people to talk to, because I'm in this tiny little hamlet in Putnam Valley, and you were lucky if you had an antenna that would reach that far. Usually you're just talking to the same kids that you talked to while you were in school. And oh my gosh, yes. Yes.
Changes things. And one thing that you said that I think is really important is, you know, I think we as educators and as people, adults with learning disabilities, you know, the teachers can't know everything. And that's one of the reasons why students really need to self-advocate, because, you know, we have really high expectations of our teachers, and we should have high expectations of them, but they can't know everything, and they can't be in their students' bodies, and they don't know what their students are thinking. And it's hard for them to, you know, it takes a whole year for them to really know who's in their classroom and to really understand everyone's experiences in the landscape of their students. So I think, you know, people put a lot of pressure, parents put a lot of pressure on teachers to know everything, and they just can't know everything.
No, absolutely. We have a really good comment from Bursting Autism. She has, I'm assuming yes, she's got an autistic child, and she's talking about being stuck in this assistive tech loop where she can't really, the same technology is being thrown at her child. And she also says, this is a good thing for us to talk about. What about a child who can't self-advocate?
So I don't think that ever happens, right? I don't believe
if you have someone who's nonverbal.
Do you not see their face, right? Do you not see their expression? So I feel like self-advocacy doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be verbal, right? And so I think we have to think like outside of the box and how other ways that we communicate. Like, you can see my face right now, and I unfortunately express myself in way too many ways with my face. And so having a student, like being able to see that a student is frustrated, and being able to relay that to teachers, I think is part of their own self-advocacy. So Bursting with Autism, I think it would be a great idea to encourage your kid to keep doing like certain or to identify certain expressions or certain ways that they are expressing themselves, and identify that with like being frustrated or being happy or content with like the outcome or whatever it is. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and while we're waiting for that reply, something else that, you know, also comes to mind, depending on the child, I mean, that's a really good point. So I have experience with one of my students who I worked with who was cerebral palsy, and she was non-ambulatory and nonverbal. And she would not have had a quarter of the services that she has had she not had a mother who was a true warrior advocate for her. Her mom took it upon herself, and I realized that, yeah, as a working mother, that, you know, how much can I do? You know, I'm working full time, I have my children, and then trying to do research and all this other stuff can sometimes be very daunting. But I have to say that this one parent, Carol, she was phenomenal, and she actually did tons and tons in research, and she was relentless and did not stop until she got exactly what she wanted from the school. Now, in my case, I was going through the school system in the 70s, and that was right after around 1975, 1976, when the special education laws were passed. I was 5 years old or 6. It's hard to remember that far back. But my mother was lucky enough to have somebody who was a teacher, who was beginning the whole special ed movement, who was right in with the legislature. We just happened across this woman, and she took me on as a tutor for free. But what she also was relentless. And she was at the school all the time. And as a teacher and as a former administrator, squeaky wheels, they get the oil. You just got to be that squeaky wheel. You have to be, don't go for the victim. This is what they're doing. Go to the very proactive, I am not accepting anything less. And everything that you do needs to be documented and in paperwork, and show up, be visible, be there often, you know, and you will get what you need for your child. It's just a matter of, unfortunately, a lot of time, because it's a very time consuming process, but you will get there.
I think the other thing is what I've done with a lot of parents, and we've done all these amazing workshops, is that you get tired as a parent, and you're just tired of like fighting for something that is a right. And I think something that's really important is being able to find a community, whether it's in your parent-teacher organization, and be able to connect with other parents. So even if you guys like are able to swap and have like one parent sit in with another parent, like to just have like more bodies, I think that that's something that's really important. And to all the parents, like, you guys are just incredible, like silent and loud warriors. And I think that you're like going to like whatever the VIP of heaven is, like you're going there. But I know that it's really, 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 really hard. And I think something that's really interesting that I hear a lot is that just like parents are just struggling themselves. And I think the other thing that we're missing too is that a lot of parents, some parents aren't advocates because it's like not in their personality to like yell at the front door. But the other thing that we have to realize is that I work in an urban school, and there's no way that parents can take off time to be there at the door, pounding on the door. So I think something that we are really trying to do is to pull resources like into one community. And I think if you're able to do that, then it's not as stressful. You can all collectively like bargain, essentially say like we have 5 people here that need the same thing. We need this assistive technology, and this is our right. And like, we'll go in together with a lawyer.
And on the flip side of that, I mean, I think it's really important to remember that ultimately the child is in this life, you know, in their body by themselves for the long haul, that no matter what happens as things evolve, you know, they have to be their own best advocate because they really are their best advocate. And I think just respecting and honoring that journey and consistently trying to help them feel like they're not alone, and that, you know, a lot of times we have these beautiful big ideas, and, you know, it takes a long time for people to start seeing them. And I think that's one of the reasons why Meg and I were just so grateful to find each other, because we finally realized that, okay, great, let's keep moving with this because this is right, and we are onto something here. But not every kid is going to feel that way. I mean, not every adult feels that way. I think a lot of adults with learning disabilities still feel isolated. So as long as you can show that child throughout their process, you know, you're not alone, you have good ideas, you know, this beautiful big thinking that you experience is what the world needs. I think that on a very basic level, it needs to be like a daily reminder for kids, you know, because for them, the experience of having to deal with all these adults who are trying to work everything out is so difficult. And you know, it's confusing and challenging, and they don't know how to make sense of that all the time, especially if they're young. So just that like daily reminder that they need to keep moving forward and advocating for themselves. And, you know, whatever that means, if that means advocating in the family or advocating at school, you know, advocating in general, I think.
We have some interesting stuff happening in the chat that I just want to address. So one of our parents is talking about not getting necessarily the attention that their child needs. And then how do you deal with that in a tenuous situation in CSE meetings? So as a parent, I've been into all my children's meetings. I think there's a lot of different approaches here. You know, for my situation, because we were in just the beginning of special education. And the funny thing for me was when I was diagnosed with dyslexia and also processing issues as well, this wonderful woman, Jackie Foley, took me on for 3 years. The first year, she had my mom bring me to her 2 times a week for free because we were so incredibly poor. So she taught me how to read. So eventually I started going to these meetings, and my services, this is another issue that we could definitely address. My services were beginning to be taken away from me because they were under the misconception that because I could finally learn how to read in the 3rd grade, that I don't need help anymore. And there's so many different layers to special education and to a child's needs. And I absolutely needed services. I still need services, I think. But when you're dealing with a tenuous situation, I mean, it seems like it appears that bursting autism is hitting a lot of roadblocks, and we're having a lot of chat in the chat stream about lawyering up or not lawyering up. I would have to say that when you feel like you're hitting a lot of walls, this is just for me. Honestly, I have to get centered. I have to meditate. I have to, for me, I pray, and then I get real and I ask for help. And I'll go in, I'll be the teary-eyed parent and not fake. Like, it's real. Like, I'll cry and like, I need your help. Please help me. And I also have to understand that they may be right. So in this situation with my son just recently, I got a bunch of these. He's now out of 1st grade. He's in 2nd grade. And a lot of his scores are coming back like really, really bad. And he was rocking math in 1st grade, and now in 2nd grade he's not. And I'm seeing this huge decline, and it's scaring the heck out of me. And I had a meeting with his teacher, and I'm pushing right now, and I am going to advocate for this in the next meeting. He needs to have his questions rephrased and reread to him, without a doubt. He can't comprehend. He's still cognitively trying to decode everything he's trying to read. But when I'm sitting there with the teacher, I'm telling her one thing, and she's telling me in her expert opinion something else. And I still do need to listen to that. And the principal checked in with me, and the principal was like, how was the meeting? And I was like, it was hard. It was really, really hard, because it's hard to hear where my child's at sometimes. I have this expectation of where I want him to be at. He may never be that. He's going to be his own being. He's going to be his own person. And I have to respect, even though I'm there to advocate for my child and to do what I think is best for him, this is a team. And I do believe that his teachers do have the best intentions for him, without a doubt. And the specialists that he's working with, I do know that they truly care for him. And I'm in a great district. I love my district. But I think that, we're talking about, I have a tendency, I can be a mommy gorilla, and I want to like go in there and force the situation. But I also need to take a step back and realize that this is a team approach. And a lot of times if I'm vulnerable and I let them know my frustrations and just ask them, please help me with this. I'm doing the best I can. And also validate that I know that you're doing the best you can, that you care about my child. Appealing to the humanness in the administration and the teachers only, helps.
Yeah, I think you hit a really good point. Is sometimes parents come in and they're like, well, this is what I need for my kid, and you're doing this wrong. And I always try to tell parents, like, imagine somebody coming into your job and telling you that you're doing your job wrong. That in itself it's just gonna change the conversation to somebody being defensive, and that's so obvious to me. And the other thing that we have to, like, I'm always like, it is your team, it's your partner. Like, this is the only way that your kid's gonna get through the class, right? And so if you're going to isolate them and insult them, then it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many great comments in the comment section. One really great question was also, is it okay to have your child demonstrate their abilities in the IEP meeting? And the answer to that is absolutely. Positively at special ed, we're kind of all about that, I think it's super important for kids to know what their abilities are. I had one student we'll get to this later, but we're going to talk a little bit about our breakthrough stories for some of our kids. But I'm going to mention mine now because it seems appropriate. One of my students, he struggles with reading, struggles with writing, and then he just gets lost in class, and then he disconnects. He just shuts off. So something that I was talking about with him, I was like, well, what are you good at? And of course, every kid with learning disability is like, I'm good at building, I'm good with my hands, I can build anything. And I'm like, cool. When we were at Jen, your makeup looks great, though. You look fantastic.
For anybody that's wondering, why did Megan just break off? Because my right eye has just been like pouring tears this entire thing. And while this is a very sensitive topic, I'm actually not crying. My eye is just doing its own thing. Sorry.
Sorry. Something that was cool and that I saw another student do one time was actually build a structure to talk about a book that he read. And so he built an actual physical structure out of wood. And Amelia and I were actually in that, we were in that conversation with a student from Science Leadership Academy. And he was talking about like, even that the three prongs of the structure demonstrated like the three themes he was going to talk about. And so I was like, oh my gosh, my kid has to do this. And so when I went to the teacher and when I went to my kid's teacher, I was like, hey, do you think we could do this? And she was like, absolutely. She's like, of course I want this kid to succeed. Like that's what I'm here for. You know, like of course I want my kids to succeed. And it seems like you're the only one who can sort of talk to him and break through. And so I think that's you have to come up with different solutions in order to show.
We have a mic. We have an echo. Amelia, is there a way that you could possibly mute? Okay, go ahead, Megan.
I was just talking about the structures.
Yeah, so the student building that structure, and you went back to the teacher?
Yeah, and I asked the teacher if this would be like an okay way for a kid to show what they knew about the book or what they had read within the book. And she was like, that's a great idea. She's like, I'd love to do that. Of course he can present like that. So I think we just have to come up with solutions instead of saying, hey, like, you're not doing this correctly, to be able to collectively with everyone on the team to be able to come up with like real solutions, and not really isolate people as much, even though we want what we want. We need to make sure that everyone that we're finding the strengths in our team, actually. Amelia, I had a question for you. My question, Amelia works you work with guided inquiry. And how do you think guided inquiry helps students with learning disabilities, like in general, but I also think like organize their thoughts?
Yeah. So there's three things that come to mind. First, guided inquiry is very scaffold in nature. So the skills that they build are cumulative and it kind of builds upon itself over time. The information search process is a theory devised by a information scientist at Rutgers University. And so it's this whole idea that we have information seeking behaviors that get exhibited regardless of your age or your research intent. And so it's a psychological process in essence. And as the kids move through that, they feel frustration, doubt, optimism, confusion, clarity. And so it really helps them to sort of experience all the emotions that you might experience throughout your life and then manage them and ask for help when you need to. And so because the information search process is characterized by those 6 stages, and those 6 stages are thoughts, feelings, and actions that kids experience, it's really interesting because they know when to ask for help. And I think for a kid with learning disability, that's the biggest thing. You just have to know when to ask for help, whether you're a kid or an adult. If you need clarification or you need something modified or you're just not understanding something, I mean, that's something for me. If I'm not understanding something, I have to ask it in a million and one ways. And I actually, when I first started interning, I would not hear things and register, or I would hear things, but it wouldn't register. And so if somebody, I was working in New York City, if I was getting a lot of instruction, I just thought, okay, I just have to write this down. I have to remember it. I can't write it down, And then it got to the point where I realized I just need to write this down because I don't have to pretend like I can register everything and know everything. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think, yeah, it's just really important to ask for help and to recognize that you have certain strategies that you have to implement no matter what. And if you're comfortable implementing those strategies, if you're comfortable asking help, whether it's your librarian or your teacher or your parent or a friend, that makes things easier.
I think those concepts of
Can you give an example, Amelia, of like a guided inquiry research? Like, because I know that your kids have had really amazing results and really amazing topics.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a plug for progressive project-based education. I think it's really fascinating. I have one student who did not have a learning disability, but whose mother passed away of breast cancer, and she studied bereavement in children. I had another student who studied dyslexia to better understand her own learning disability. And so you just, you get to this point where the kids can actually start self-researching, which is something that I think Meg and I ultimately, I had always done that, but I think, in adulthood, became really important to self-research. Personal topic choice, getting really attached to that is really important. So it doesn't matter whether it's a 9th grade project on ice cream or a 12th grade scientific literature review on your learning disability, as long as it's personally relevant and you have that scaffold curriculum and can work through those things sequentially. I think any guided inquiry project is a good project as long as it's a personal topic. And that's why you do see so many kids study either personal illnesses or illnesses in their family, learning disabilities, and then just their passions. We'll get kids that do stuff on black holes, kids that do stuff on the economy. I think that's a huge step that education still needs to make, is making things real life applicable. But the more real life applicable it can be to a student with a learning disability, the better off they are.
I think what's kind of cool though in guided inquiry is that there's a space for asking a question, right? Some research question. And then you go further into it, but you also have somebody there to sort of help you with the struggle. Like all of guided inquiry, I feel like it's about the process as much as it is about what you find at the end.
Yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, no, that's really well said, Meg. I think definitely you have to follow that inquiry all the way through, and the process, the product, it's all so important. And I think there was a comment in here about taking a couple steps back and moving forward. And I think that's also, progressive education in general, inquiry-based education, project-based education. It's all about that like cyclical experience of growing and moving backward, moving forward. And that's the reality is that is life. So if you can simulate those experiences for kids, what could be better preparation for life than that?
Amelia, did you happen to write a book on guided inquiry?
I think there's a book in there somewhere.
Yeah, no, I am, and I'm really passionate.
What's your book?
I think what got me so excited about guided inquiry, it's called a Guided Inquiry Approach to Teaching the Humanities Research Project. There's like 3 of them now. I'm sorry. No, but I think what's really cool is that you see kids with learning disabilities gain confidence over time. And that's what got me convinced that guided inquiry is a good pedagogical approach, because if you can make a learning disabled kid feel confident after a 6-8 week research project, you know, you can make anybody feel confident.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it doesn't take that much. And I think that that's a lot of times what kids with learning disabilities need. I mean, at least in high school, I think that confidence in their abilities is so important. And that's why it is really important for them to know their abilities. And, you know, we have them write a lot of reflections, and that's usually what's kind of reflected, is that they felt in the beginning that they didn't have a lot of confidence, and then they come out feeling so confident. So, you know, we need more opportunities for kids to feel confident in education, I think. It's as simple as that.
And it's so funny because when Amelia and I first met, she kept talking about progressive education. Now, I haven't worked in education that long. It's been like a year. And it was really, really funny where she's like, well, progressive education. I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, all I know is my traditional classroom where like people were talking at me. I was bored. I wanted to stand up. And then I went to the next class, and it didn't really matter if I got the information or not. It was just pushed on to the next class and the next subject.
Experience in middle school. I mean, I was lucky. I was very, very, very lucky that I had the opportunity to go to private school. But I think that is the crux of the problem. Like, that creativity in school is dead. Imagination is suppressed. And, you know, you get a lot of kids unable to take that experimental path toward, you know, whether that's through service learning or project-based learning or inquiry learning, you know, or roundtable discussions. There aren't a lot of opportunities for that. I mean, there definitely are more, because I think we have some really, really, really awesome teachers that are entering, and I think there are just so many new approaches that people are experimenting with. So it's possible. We just have to do more of it.
We got to get the word out there. So I think we're going to wrap up. And something that we want to do on the podcast is we might have not followed this outline the whole time, but something we want to do is make sure that we have sort of a story, a breakthrough moment for one of our students, a tech tip, because we have Jennifer Kronk over here, who is like a tech guru.
So not a guru, just a geek.
Storking it. For sure. And then the last thing we want to do is sort of end with gratitude. And I think that that's always important, because we can talk about everything that's going wrong in our lives, but I always think that it's important to be in the moment and to be grateful that we wake up every morning and that we have that breath, and that we can breathe, and that we can smile, and that we can cry, and that we're alive. And so gratitude is something that we just always have to find that silver lining, especially when you feel like you're all alone and in the darkness. And so it's important to just have that little bit of light and that little bit of gratitude. So Amelia, do you want to start off with your gratitude for the week?
Dying. So I just want to say that yesterday I got to spend the day with my grandmother, and we went to Thai Kitchen, which is my favorite restaurant in our area. And I'm just so happy that I get to spend that time with her. I had the day off from school. So it was just really, really wonderful to connect with her. And she's German, and we were trying to figure out how I could get German citizenship so I could be dual citizen, just fun. Hanging out with my grandma. And I'm just really grateful for that. I'm 27, and I'm grateful that I have my grandmother. And yeah, I think that for me was huge.
Yeah, and I was telling Amelia that I was like, something that all of the kids with learning disabilities, I for sure know this now, and it makes so much sense, is that, well, first it's bad because like all the parents are like, they don't know how to hang out with like kids their own age, and I'm like, it's fine. Like, I hang out with like women who are 40 or 50 or like little kids, like the the other 30-year-olds. I'm like, I don't know what it is. But it's always been like something like my parents would be like, we're having an adult party, and I'd be like hanging out. I'm like, so what's going on at work, Bob? And I'm like 12. Like, I don't even know.
Yeah, no, because we know where the wisdom is. We seek the wisdom. We know.
Yeah, and we find the little kids who like remember to be their like little beautiful free selves.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
right.
Jen.
I want to sign off before my computer cuts me off.
All right.
All right.
Thank
Thanks so much, Amelia. That was awesome.
Bye, Meals.
All right. So the last part of the segment, last tech tip. This past week, I've had this awesome opportunity to use. Now, I do Google Apps professional development. I do all sorts of technology professional development. But this one particular tool that I'm going to tell you about, if you're used to using the Chrome browser and you have a child that has processing issues or coming from somebody who's dyslexic, there's a game-changing tool that I just recently started playing with called Read Write extension, and it gives you this little toolbar. And unfortunately, I don't think Blab has the opportunity for me to switch to a screencast view, but I did do a small screencast, and it is on my YouTube channel. You could just go to YouTube and search Jennifer Cronk. There's like 3 of my personas. The one with the most videos is the one that has it. But the Read Write toolbar, what it does, which is so cool, just in short, it will read the text to the kids. It will, if a child highlights a word and clicks on the translator option, I'll translate the word into either Portuguese, Spanish, French, I think Italian, but I'm not positive about that. The other thing that I like is it has a dictionary, but Megan, you're going to love this. It also has, if I highlight a word and I go to dictionary, and if you have a child who can't read and it opens up a dictionary passage, not going to help. So one of the things I love the most about the Read Write toolbar is that it has a picture dictionary. So I highlighted the word global and I hit the picture dictionary and showed me a bunch of clip art icons. It showed globe, the world, and surrounding the world. And I was like, that rocks. I think that's awesome. Where was this when I was trying to learn how to read? And the other thing that I like is if a child goes through and highlights a bunch of words that they don't know, there's a tool in there that collects all the highlights and puts it on its own Google document. That's just called collecting highlights. The next one collects all those words and puts it in a grid. So you have the word, then you have the you have the picture dictionary showing you what it is. You have a dictionary entry, and then it has this extra column that you can have the kids. It automatically creates like a worksheet where the kids can use that in a sentence.
What?
Yeah,
That's
it's crazy.
awesome.
Wait,
Because
there's more.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So
I know. I'm like so excited too. Then it also takes dictation. So if you have a child, or if you're somebody like me, where honestly I am much more efficient at speaking than I am at typing, and I'm a pretty fast typist. My son, for example, has issues with articulation, so he receives speech, but he still, and fine motor articulation, I meant to say, and he gets services for both. But for him, when he's doing an essay, he can use the voice recognition and just talk to his laptop, and the laptop will actually record all the text for him. And then for the teacher can highlight an area, insert a comment, and record their voice. So it's just like such an amazing tool. And it not just works in Google Documents, but it also works on the browser. Go ahead, Meg. I know you want to say something.
Okay, so what you're saying is that there's the visual, there's the explanation, there's the audio. Yep. Not only like speaking it, but also receiving the audio. That's really cool.
Yeah, and it's just something that one of the districts that I worked for wrote a grant and got this for all their kids, K to 12. And I was like, that's the way you do it. You give that tool that will be life-changing for some, but provide it for all, because it can only improve the mass of students,
And I think what's also really interesting about that is every single time that I would read a dictionary, I'm like, so what does this mean? Like, how am I supposed to use this? Like,
yes.
get it. Even still today, I'll be like, what does that word mean? Because I'm just interested. It's great.
And I need to hear the words spoken to me that I don't know, because I still decode phonemes improperly. I can't sound words out right.
No, not at all, for sure. We should like wrap this up, but I'm totally agree with you on not being able to spell out words, because what we've ended up doing as our compensation is looking at a word, knowing what it's supposed to sound like, and we just memorize that. Like that's literally all we are doing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of incredible that we've memorized what every word looks like and what every word is supposed to sound like. So we want to thank everybody for tuning in. This was so awesome. This is our first Blab, and we hope that you definitely tune into Positively Special Ed. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for just getting this going. Any last words?
No, I like I said before, I think that, when I met you and Amelia, it just definitely was like riding the momentum that you started in that session. I think that this is definitely something that needs to be talked about, and needs a voice, a very visual human voice, that this is a real issue that doesn't just affect a special ed classroom. And I just really am so happy that I met up with you two.
So I think the little tidbit for the week that I want to leave everyone with is to just stay focused. And I hate when people tell me that, but I think the biggest thing is like to stay focused on your kids' happiness, right? And your happiness and sanity. So stay focused.
Thanks so much.
Bye.